Yo, what's going on everyone? Welcome back. Ah yes, the Inuyasha universe, known to be filled with much lore as well as many relics that which possess many kinds of mystical and mysterious powers. In this video we'll be going back in time to look at one of the most powerful and legendary relics from this universe, the Tetsaiga. We'll be looking at the Tetsaiga's history as well as unveiling many of its powers and techniques. Now if you're someone who's always questioned this sword along with its properties, then look no further. As mentioned before, if you're a long-time fan or supporter of the series, then welcome back and or enjoy your stay. By the way, if you're someone who hasn't seen the series or seen very little of it, then what are you doing? It's 2020. I mean, look. The series released in 2000, that's practically 20 years. Just watch it one time. Just... No, I'm joking. The series is actually pretty good and one where most should watch at least once. Alrighty, without waiting any longer, let's go back in time. Similar to the Tetsaiga's counterpart, its birth began with two entities, the first being Toga, who was known to be the most powerful yokai during Japan's feudal period. Toga was also known as the father of both Inuyasha and Sesshomaru, and the second, Totosai, who was known as the forger of both Tetsaiga and Tenseiga, as well as an old friend of Toga. The Tetsaiga was infamously known by humans and demons as the legendary Sword of Destruction. This sword possessed the ability to slay 100 demons in one stroke, contrary to its counterpart, the Tenseiga, which possessed the ability to revive 100 souls in one strike. Before Toga's death, he requested two swords be made, the Tetsaiga and the Tenseiga, though the trade-off would be that fangs from Toga himself would be offered as a catalyst for forging. Now, we're gonna go a bit deeper because the history of this sword may be a bit more daunting than you think. For starters, if not for the Tetsaiga, the Tenseiga would not exist. Now, what does this mean? So, at some point when Toga was alive, he fought a demon named Shishinki, who possessed powers of summoning black spheres. This technique was known as the Meido Zangetsuha, which was a very lethal technique. During this fight, Toga sealed the Meido within the Tetsaiga, though because of the lethality of this technique, Toga requested that another sword be made to contain it. This is where the fang comes in, which would then be forged by Totosai to give birth to Tenseiga. Now, as we might know, Sesshomaru as a child was very arrogant and prideful in many ways. Toga was well aware of this, which is why he never wished that Sesshomaru wield the Tetsaiga due to thirst for power. Toga did his job well and hid Tetsaiga from Sesshomaru. The Tetsaiga would be, quote, seeing but never seen, protected yet never known to its protector. You can't lie, that's a pretty good riddle. Sadly, this riddle would eventually be solved, and a black pearl would be extracted from the eye of Inuyasha. This pearl would lead to their father's tomb, where the Tetsaiga would lie in his bones. The sword would be widely feared and sought after amongst many demons, and its wielder would only face many challenges along the way once acquiring it. As mentioned, throughout the series, many demons were known to have both feared and desired the Tetsaiga, though this was never exactly the case for Inuyasha, even once laying eyes on it, which he implies it to be a piece of junk. That is, until the sword calls and he wields it properly. It was theorized that it was because of Kagome being mortal and Inuyasha wanting to protect her which allowed it to unveil its true form. And personally, I'd say this theory isn't too far-fetched, only since a parallel could be drawn between both Inuyasha and Kagome as well as Toga and Inuyasha's mother, Izuyoi. Tetsaiga was forged as a way for Inuyasha to protect his mortal mother, so in short it was Inuyasha's feelings towards another mortal which allowed effective use of the Tetsaiga, quite similar to how Toga expressed emotion for Izuyoi. Sadly, the strength of his father's sword would see its end, as Inuyasha would realize he could no longer rely on his father once the sword broke. And right here's where maturity comes into play. Since Inuyasha was no longer supported by the fang of his father, he instead had to discover hidden potential from within himself. Of course, as mentioned earlier, the Tetsaiga would require a catalyst, but this time for repair. It would be a fang from Inuyasha himself. In time, Tetsaiga would be repaired, though to master his own power without his father's support would be no easy feat. Now, there were reasons as to why Toga left behind the Tetsaiga and Tenseiga. He gave them both swords that possessed contrasting properties, which also differed from their personalities to teach them both about important values. Their father also wished they'd eventually learn and acknowledge those values. For Sesshomaru, this was learning how to feel compassion, whereas for Inuyasha, one could say it was to learn to protect others, which would also lead to maturity. So I emphasize maturity more over anything else, since early in the series he would be portrayed more so as childish and carefree. Fortunately, as time progresses, this would slowly fade, and for this reason Toga's decision would help Inuyasha mature greatly. However, like most things, this growth wouldn't come easy, as many obstacles would come at the expense of attaining such wisdom. Now, let's get into the Tetsaiga's capabilities, though first starting with its sheath. Both sheaths from the Tetsaiga and Tenseiga were crafted from the wood of Bokusino, who was known as a wise 2,000-year-old tree demon. In Tetsaiga's case, the sheath could deflect or nullify any demon or yokai-based attacks, though this could only be done in moderation. If forces from the same attacks persisted, then the sheath would crack or break, which at some point it did. But luckily for Inuyasha, at any point the sheath could be repaired. For this to take effect, the sword would have to be left beside a hive of yokai bees. They would then use their wax to repair it. The sheath also possessed the ability to summon Tetsaiga from very far distances. As for the sword itself, Tetsaiga possessed an attribute quite similar to the Tenseiga. Before dying, Toga placed a protective barrier around the Tetsaiga, one that would reject Shishomaru if he were to come into contact. The barrier would also burn pure demons that would touch it, of course with its creator being the exception to that, who could both hold and activate it. Strangely, Shippo would be another anomaly, though it could be plausible that the barrier wouldn't affect demons that displayed affection towards humans, as well as those who would appear with little to no malice. Additionally, Tetsaiga's signature attack would be known as the Wind Scar, and it's this attack of the Tetsaiga which would allow its user to slay 100 demons in one stroke. Initially, Inuyasha was never aware of how overwhelming this technique was, until Shishomaru displayed its potential. Eventually, he learned to place his own power into the attack, which formed a scar around the blade. This way, the Wind Scar would cast instantaneously. Tetsaiga's next technique and its ultimate technique would be the Backlash Wave. This technique is more so a parry, rather than a primary attack. Energy shot at the Tetsaiga's wielder would then be reflected back at the opponent, but with additional power. For this technique to work, there'd be two conditions. The first being only energy attacks composed of Yoki could be reflected, and the second was that Inuyasha's Yoki would have to be at a similar level to his opponent's. If these two conditions were unmet, then the Backlash Wave would not form. Tetsaiga's most valuable property is having the ability of absorbing demons, or demon-based artifacts destroyed by its blade. This would then convert the primary property of that demon or artifact into the Tetsaiga. We'll begin with the Red Tetsaiga. This variation was obtained as a gift after slaying the leader of the Demon Bat clan. In this form, the Tetsaiga's blade is able to cleave through barriers, allowing Inuyasha to reach enemies. The new Tetsaiga's attribute would also enhance the Wind Scar, giving the ability to break barriers on impact. This ability would prove to be effective against Naraku, but only worked once since, you know, this man stays strong. Next is the Dragon Scale Tetsaiga. This variation was acquired after breaking the demon sword Taki. While in this state, Inuyasha eventually learns the true nature of this Tetsaiga, that which it is to cut. Once Inuyasha learned to see the energy of a demon, Tetsaiga could then cut its energy, which then destroyed normal demons within an instant. As for stronger demons, the Tetsaiga could then cleave away portions of a demon's energy, which would then weaken them. Another form of Tetsaiga would be the Diamond Tetsaiga, or in other words, the Adamant Tetsaiga. This variation was obtained from Hosenki. Acquiring this one wouldn't be so easy. A test of resolve would have to be passed to receive it, and once passed, the Tetsaiga was presented. The powers of the Diamond Tetsaiga would fire a barrage of diamond spears when swung. This technique was known as the Adamant Barrage. It was also this Tetsaiga specifically that proved to dissolve barriers that which the Red Tetsaiga could not. The Diamond Tetsaiga's attribute could also be combined with the Wind Scar as well as the Backlash Wave for enhancement. And finally, the Black Tetsaiga. This variation was given once Inuyasha had proven worthy. Shishomaru then broke his Tenseiga over the Tetsaiga. The Black Tetsaiga is most widely recognized for its technique, the Meido Zangetsuha. The properties of this attack would send anyone hit with it directly to the netherworld. Eventually, once Inuyasha mastered this technique, it would then fire off multiple crescent-shaped portals, which is perhaps one of the most broken things I've seen in an anime. You know, it's fine. You know, I like it though, you know, it's pretty cool. Now, this attack wouldn't just sever the enemy, but it also had the enemy's remains drawn in by the vacuum of the crescents. This technique ultimately had proven to be far more effective than its original state, and would contribute to the demise of Naraku. Alrighty, that's pretty much everything you need to know about the Tetsaiga. Of course there were some very minor things unmentioned, but I wouldn't want to give away too much. More than likely you'll piece together more things when watching the series. Before I forget, if you feel like there was some things left unmentioned or feel confused about both Tetsaiga and Tenseiga, then I did make a video explaining Shishomaru's weapons. One last thing before I go. So amongst the 4 forms of Tetsaiga, which one do you like the most? For me, it'd have to be the Red Tetsaiga. There's just something about that crimson color that really does it for me. Okay, one more thing I promise. If you enjoyed the video, maybe consider liking and sticking around for future videos. For right now, that's all I have for you. Take care, and I'll see you all next time.